the Crimson Circle, the invitation. It started as a simple curiosity. My best friend Matt had recently moved into a small, quiet town that seemed almost too perfect to be real. It was picturesque, with old brick buildings, quiet streets, and a handful of small shops that seemed straight out of a vintage postcard. He'd been there for only a few weeks when he sent me a strange message one night. "I found something. You have to see this." I asked what he meant, but he didn't respond right away. The next day, he called me, his voice urgent but filled with an odd excitement. "I found a place," he said. "It's like this hidden group. They're not just a cult, they're something much worse. I need you to come here and see for yourself." I knew better than to ask too many questions. Matt had always been the curious type, the one who loved exploring the darker side of life. I wasn't sure if I was concerned or intrigued, but either way, I couldn't ignore the mystery. I agreed to visit. The arrival. I drove out to Matt's town the following weekend. As I pulled into the small, fog-blanketed town, the first thing I noticed was the absence of noise. It was eerily quiet. No kids playing outside, no sounds of traffic, nothing but the rustling of leaves in the wind. The air felt heavy, as if the very atmosphere was saturated with something sinister. Matt's house was on the edge of town, close to a dense patch of woods. When I arrived, he was waiting for me on the porch. His eyes were wide with a strange energy, almost as if he hadn't slept in days. "Come inside," he urged. "I've got something to show you." I stepped into his house, and immediately I could sense that something was off. There were no family photos, no personal items strewn about, just the bare essentials. But on the wall, I noticed something strange. A symbol, painted in deep red, was scrawled across the hallway. It resembled a circle with a jagged, crescent shape cutting through the middle, surrounded by symbols I couldn't recognize. "Matt, what is that?" I asked, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. He looked at it for a moment, his expression unreadable. "It's the mark of the Crimson Circle. It's a cult, but they're more than that. They're connected to something darker, something ancient. The cult's invitation." Matt handed me a small folded piece of paper. On it was an address, scrawled hastily. "Meet me here tonight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to see what I've found." The address led me to an old building on the outskirts of town, an abandoned warehouse with faded red bricks and a broken sign hanging from the roof. It was isolated, with only a few streetlights illuminating the path to the entrance. As I stood there, staring at the door, a shiver ran down my spine. I was sure I could feel eyes watching me, but when I turned, nothing was there. I hesitated for a moment, but Matt's words echoed in my head. "This is bigger than us. This is something you have to understand." I knocked on the door, my heart pounding, and a low voice on the other side called out, "Come in." The ritual inside, the atmosphere was thick with a strange metallic scent, and the low murmur of voices echoed off the concrete walls. There were about 20 people gathered, all wearing dark cloaks with hoods that obscured their faces. In the center of the room, a large, blood-red circle had been painted on the floor, surrounded by candles. The flames flickered erratically, casting long shadows across the walls. Matt was standing near the circle, his eyes wide and glazed over. He looked almost trance-like. "What is this, Matt?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What have you gotten yourself into?" But he didn't respond. A man in the center of the circle raised his arms and the crowd fell silent. He began speaking in a language I couldn't understand, low, guttural, ancient-sounding words that seemed to vibrate through my body. The room felt colder with each syllable, and I could swear the shadows in the corners of the room grew longer. Suddenly, the man lowered his arms and turned to face the crowd. "The time has come," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "We welcome the one who waits." A sense of unease washed over me. I didn't know what was happening, but I could feel something terrible in the air. The ground beneath me seemed to thrum, as though it was alive. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a towering silhouette, impossibly tall, with a head that seemed to have no features, just darkness. It moved with unnatural grace, its steps silent, and I could hear whispers emanating from the corners of the room. My heart stopped. Matt stepped forward, his voice hollow as he repeated words I couldn't comprehend. The figure reached out its long, clawed fingers, and as it did, I felt a cold chill wrap around my chest. The lights flickered once more, And then, without warning, a sharp, piercing scream erupted from one of the cult members. It was cut short, and I watched in horror as the man collapsed to the floor, his body crumpling in a heap. The crowd remained silent, unmoving, as if nothing had happened. That's when I realized they weren't just part of the cult. They were the cult, and their ritual wasn't just for show. This was real. This was something ancient, something beyond human understanding. The darkness unleashed. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. I was trapped. The creature in the center of the room, if it could even be called that, raised its hand, and the shadows around it seemed to come alive, crawling across the walls like living things. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with incoherent thoughts and visions. I saw images of desolate landscapes, of twisted, writhing bodies, of a burning sky. I saw people, their faces frozen in terror, all staring at me from the depths of the darkness. And then I heard it, the voice. A low, guttural sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere, inside my own head. Join us, become one, serve the one who waits. I tried to block it out, but the voice was insistent, pushing deeper into my mind. I could feel my will bending, my thoughts slipping away. Suddenly, Matt appeared beside me, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. His face was pale, his skin stretched tight as though he were no longer fully human. His mouth twisted into a smile, but it wasn't his smile. It was a grin of something ancient, something evil. "You can't escape," he whispered, his voice a distorted version of his own. "We are part of it now. You will be too." Before I could react, the cultists moved toward me, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light as Matt's. They chanted louder, their voices rising in a frenzied crescendo. The shadows in the room grew thicker, suffocating the air. I was surrounded, trapped in the middle of the ritual. The figure in the center of the room began to move toward me, its hands reaching out like long, twisted claws. The ground beneath me shifted, as if the very earth was opening up, and I felt myself being pulled into it. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body refused to obey. And then, just as the creature's hand brushed against my skin, I woke up. The aftermath, I sat up, gasping for air. The room was silent. It was morning. I rubbed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing, the remnants of the nightmare still clinging to me. My hands shook as I glanced around, but everything seemed normal. It was just a dream, right? I tried to call Matt, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I went to his house, but it was empty. The door was unlocked, and his things were gone. No sign of a struggle, no trace of him at all. It wasn't until later that day that I heard the news. Several members of the town had vanished overnight. No signs of where they'd gone, no clues left behind. All that remained were strange symbols painted in red, just like the one I'd seen in Matt's house. And then the whispers began. Late at night, when I was alone, I would hear them, soft, almost inaudible, calling my name. And when I looked into the darkness, I could see the shape of a figure, just standing there, watching me. It wasn't a nightmare, it was real. The Crimson Circle had found me, and I was next. And as always, if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers.